But then there's two witnesses. And then there's what you said, what he said, and guess what? It all matches nicely that you were the primary aggressor.
Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's my mystery. Sorry for being away again for a while. I got a new job and I moved, so I've been really busy, but I felt really compelled to come back to you guys because I missed you, and so much has happened in the true crime universe since I've been gone. Like, we're all hooked now on the Gabrielle Petito case. It's so sad, like terribly, terribly sad. But one of the saddest parts for me personally is the fact that nobody picked up on what kind of person Brian Laundrie was. And trust me, people like Brian are dime a dozen. There's so many people like him in this world. But they easily, like most, toxic people, slip under the radar. But there are ways to identify people like him. And I wanted to talk to you a bit today about coercive control, about controlling people, abusive relationships, and what actually makes someone a controlling asshole, really. What are the signs of coercive control? Well, one of the first one is monitoring activities. So the person will exert control over their victim by deciding what they wear, where they go, who they socialize with, what they eat and drink, and what activities they take part in. The controlling person may also demand or gain access to the partner's computer, cell phone, email account, and convince their partner that they want to check up on them because they love them. However, this behavior is not part of a healthy or loving relationship. And it can also translate into financial control, which is a very clever trick that a lot of abusers use in domestically violent marriages or things like that. But it's basically when a person controls their access to money and does not allow them to make financial decisions. Another golden sign of coercive control is isolating the other person. So the controlling person tries to isolate their victim away from, say, family members, friends, people like that, because if family members or friends were around, they would be able to say, that's not normal. And there's cases of people who've been in these relationships where it's only after they break up with the person that they tell people what was going on because they felt too afraid to at the time because the partner had such a control over them. And when they tell them that what was going on, everybody's like, that is not normal. And that's why the person tries to isolate the victim. Then, of course, the usual, such as insults. This is a way to try and undermine the person's self-esteem, and it may involve name calling, highlighting a person's insecurities, or putting them down. So over time, the victim's self-esteem erodes so much that they really do believe that they don't deserve better than this particular situation, which is perfect for the abuser. So there are a couple of signs that I just read out to you there that really do remind me of Gabby and Brian's relationship. One of the first ones, of course, is isolating the other person. Brian, being the controlling person he was able to take Gabby away from everyone, not just physically isolate her, but also probably emotionally isolate her. There was so much that probably was going on in this relationship that people really weren't aware of because it was happening in the middle of nowhere in a van. That was the first red flag that stuck out to me. Another one was making threats and being intimidated. And I did see that Brian locked Gabby out of their van in the desert in the middle of nowhere where the temperatures were probably dangerously high. And that was like a sure way for him to scare her, exert his control over her. And I'm sure at that point, Gabby did realize, this is more dangerous than I thought the way Brian's acting, but she was already so far in deep with his control over her that it was probably very, very hard for her to walk away, because when she associates defying Brian with punishment, of course it's going to be hard for her to stand up to him or to do something, which is really, really sick. When you think about it, what kind of person Brian was to act like that. Like, who would lock their girlfriend out of the van in, such high temperatures? the kind of person who would do a lot worse, obviously, which is really, really sick. Another one is insulting the other person. We do see in the body cam footage that Gabby was starting this website to do with her blog, and she had a lot of ambitions regarding it, which was really admirable. But Brian was turning her down, saying she couldn't do it, that, it wasn't going to work, all this usual stuff to try and put her down, remove her autonomy. The thing about it was as well is that in a way he probably felt that if Gabby did become successful in this, that she would just be like, there'd be enough people involved in their lives seeing what's going on, that he would eventually be found out, because this controlling behavior wasn't just something that just started, before Gabby's murder. It was actually something that was actually showing up long before, because there was an occasion, and this, relates to the monitoring activities, sign of coercive control, that Gabby wanted to go to a yoga class, but Brian took her passport from her so she couldn't go, or her ID or something, a friend said, which is like that is such a clear sign that someone is really wrong with this person, that he is beyond controlling, that he is dangerous. And that's why I think it's so sad that no one picked up on this. But that's the thing about these controllers like Brian, is they're so good at convincing the person that it's in their best interests not to tell anybody else what is going on, which makes them truly dangerous and sick. And they're able to keep it under wraps by being, in a van in the middle of nowhere and putting Gabby down so much that she really has no autonomy to stand up for herself and say, no, I'm not letting you do this to me anymore. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about these kind of signs, because the abuser does a good job of covering things up. But if you're well tuned into what these signs of abuse are, you'll be able to spot it if someone you love is in a relationship like this, or even yourself. Because one of the classic things about being in an abusive relationship is you don't actually realize that it's not normal until you leave. They're trying to get you to move to another country or go out to the middle of nowhere. You only see, looking back, well, they were really isolating me, or they were really putting me down. And this all comes down to their insecurity. They see the person that they're trying to put down as someone much better than them, much more talented, shining brighter than them, and they want to try and destroy it, which is really the sickest thing, but it's literally a hallmark of a toxic person. So I decided to do a little bit of research for you guys on what would make somebody like this, and I found another article which describes what things could possibly, lead to this kind of personality type that Brian Laundrie was. And one of the first things that came up was a difficult childhood. It says that the reason why every person grows to be the way that they are at the present moment is because of how they were brought up in the past. Usually people tend to develop a controlling behaviour if they themselves were being controlled in the past. And if you try to dig into the history, usually these people tended to have quite controlling people in their life, such as parents before them. So they sort of grew up and realized that maybe that is what love looked like, or which it obviously doesn't. Or they sort of just realized that this was sort of normal treatment. Another actually quite profound reason could be that they suffered quite a big loss or hurt in the past. And that's why they wish to control each and everything in their spouse or children's lives, because they had a bad experience in the past which led to a significant loss or wound in their life. And they tend to develop this mindset because so that they can't be hurt in the future. So they take control of each and everything in their life so nothing can go wrong again. Then one of the biggest ones that I think is insecurity and low self-esteem. The reason why they control over people is because they felt like they had no control over their own life, and it just comes out in frustration. They tend to become dominant or aggressive, and maybe they were never paid attention to in the past, and now they want to do everything to make someone's life revolve around them. So I thought that was really interesting in regards to Brian. When you think about it, like maybe he felt like he didn't get that much attention in his life, or that he, never really stood out in any way. And here's Gabby, and, she's really Like most young girls in relationships looking to be loved, and he could take advantage of that to make her whole life revolve around him. Then the other one was for sake of ego and pride. Some people just choose to become controlling and dominant for the sake of their pride and ego. They feel like they should have the upper hand on everybody so that they can't crush their ego and pride. So that, makes sense in a lot of ways when you think about it. It's sort of like a wounded ego, and any sort of threat to the ego is very much controlled and, so that nothing could go wrong. But one of the ones I actually found most interesting was that maybe they weren't paid attention to, so they want someone's whole life to revolve around them now. I thought that was interesting in regards to Brian, like even with the isolation and everything, going out in a van, he sounded like this kind of person. But I think all those traits, could have applied to him. We would only really know if we knew him personally. But it's just interesting that those were seen as some of the reasons why personalities develop like this. But does that make it okay? Definitely not. Like, hurt people don't have permission to hurt other people. They just don't. And that's why most people go to therapy and sort things out. Brian obviously was not self-aware enough and probably got away with as much as he was doing up until that point, because I've heard in interviews a lot of people didn't really know this was going on with Gabby, which was the saddest part. So I don't know much about Brian's childhood, personally, or of course, or even with information that I could find online. But I did find some information that when he started dating Gabby in 2019, she moved with him into his family home, which I thought was interesting. And he proposed to Gabby in July 2020, which is kind of short, to propose to someone. I don't know, other people might think, but they were also very young. So I thought that was interesting. And on October the 20th, 2020, he shared a picture on Instagram that said, "Never got around to posting these. I die just to watch all of our memories on repeat and never loved anyone as much as this girl," which is interesting too. And then, of course, it was on August the 12th that a witness saw him and Gabby arguing over a phone while her Ford Transit van was parked near Moonflower Community Cooperative in Moab in Utah. And the police department officers determined that insufficient evidence existed to justify criminal charges, which I'm sure they regret right now. And he told one of the officers that Gabby tried to slap him because she thought he was going to leave her in Moab without a ride, which should have rang alarm bells in the police officer's head, I think. Like, they're in the middle of nowhere and she thought that he was going to leave her. But I know it's quite complex what happened at that scene, but still annoying. And that night he stayed in a hotel while Gabby stayed with her van. And then it was on August the 17th that he flew from Salt Lake City in Utah to Tampa, Florida. And that's when all this, pretty much started. So it's really interesting, this case. I'm gripped by it, and it's really exciting to see what's going to happen next. I do think that Brian, I personally, I have my suspicions. Like, we can't say everything's alleged at this point because, he's, because it's the way that it works. But it's going to be interesting to see what happened. And obviously Brian knows more than he's letting on. So, yeah. So even without all those accusations, it's obvious that Brian and Gabby had a very toxic relationship. So it's very important to know what goes into these kind of relationships, I think. So I just want to wrap up this video by saying that domestic violence, abusive relationships, coercive control, and controlling intimate relationships are a very serious subject. And if you or anyone you suspect is in a situation like this, there are helplines that you can phone nationally. I'm sure in the US there'll be another one than in the UK or in Ireland where I'm at. And I'll try and link a couple in the description box if I find them. I also want to say thank you guys so much for watching as usual, and that I hope to post more regularly as time moves forward. And that, I'm going to be keeping up with the Gabby Petito case, and anything that you guys know or any other information, I'd love to hear it in the comments, or any other cases similar that you want me to take to check out. And thank you guys for watching, and I hope you took something from this video, and have a really great day, and I'll be back again soon. Bye.